my friends, I'm Rick, and this is Yours to the Table, and we're still doing our bit of a shallow dive into the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd Edition books and supplements that were produced in the late 80s, early 90s. And one of the things that in the role-playing tabletop role-playing game sphere, if you will, is how much hard or how much expansive work goes into certain style and certain game systems. And I'm not trying to target any specific, but when we get into a certain level, things really expand sideways. We start getting deeper into things, and later we take things for granted. And so when I got picking into this section, I hadn't seen some of these books in this section of my shelf in a long time, and it brought back instant memories. And one of the things was a young me. So when I was in my late teens, and I had a growing understanding of the world and things in the world and how things should look or how they should function or how I think in my mind that they ought to based on the things I've been taught, etc. It's one thing to say that. It's another thing to say, well, what exactly is a bastard sword? What is nunchucks if you've never seen them? That kind of thing. So prior to 2nd edition beginning to really expand in a lateral manner, you had little bits and pieces in your game book. So if you had the Dungeons and Dragons basic or blue or red, even the white, you had one little page, a half a page that it said, here's your equipment, here's your list of equipment that you can buy. And this there is the weapons and armor and things that were available, and this is what you can equip your characters with. So at this point, we really see an expansion and growth. But more importantly, they make an effort to be more descriptive and, when possible, give pictures or images of the items they're talking about. And this is really important to people whose imagination is not quite as expansive as others or not as well read. So, it just makes life simpler when you have something that's not just an endless list of pages of lists. And so we get in and they go into greater details when we talk about armor types and why the armor types are better than others or not better than others, how some are similar and they differ by appearances, and they go in, you can see they make great effort in this book to give you this information. So this opened my window of getting a much better idea of how things fit, and this carries over time, because then it becomes almost rote by memory. Well, we know that full plate is far superior, but it also has these disadvantages. And as a dungeon master, you work on those disadvantages on a small level. You don't want to make that a big thorn in the side of your player or your player's group, but the occasional tweak or twinge or pinch just to remind them that there are disadvantages has its moments. It's a matter of flavor and taste, I guess. So we get into the same thing here. They're talking shields. You really don't appreciate the full body shield versus a buckler. I mean, now you get them side by side kind of thing, and you go, and you're gonna lug this thing for 20 miles through a dungeon? Sure. Why don't you just carry the doors with you? Whatever. We're definitely going to get some penalties for that. But I had a player do that once. It was an experience. It actually panned out more than... I guess it helped him more than it hindered. So we got barding for amounts. Things that, like I said, I grew up around horses. My mom was a horse nut. We had horses and ponies and things like this. But it never occurred to me probably to put armor on them. Now, that's funny because, in a way, there's still elements in modern-day equestrian that would be recognized in medieval Europe, in the aspect that we still sometimes put coats over the animals, and those coats can be for decorative purposes, but they would be resembling what light body armor might have looked back in the day, kind of stuff. You see it more in like in Britain when they do their royal military parades and things like that when they're full kit. I mean, but the concept's still there. So so barding, get into things like saddles and stirrups and stuff that I never considered until, I did, but I had friends that go, what does it matter if there's a saddle on the horse? And I'm like, you didn't tell that to my mother. I'm telling you, that's not how it works. So there we got an acrobus, battle axes, bolas, composite bows, arrows, crossbows. You get the idea. I mean, just about every major weapon and armor and equipment type is in here with a decent entry to it. So from there on after, some of this carries over into later versions of equipment guides and things like that. And we also see the development. So to my knowledge, this was probably one of the first, although there may be a Rollmaster variant on that preceded this one, timeline when it came out. But after that, just every major game franchise has their version of this kind of book. Anyway, I'm Rick, and hope you guys have yourself a great weekend. Because you want the cat girls to exist.